On Tuesday night, the Minnesota Lynx evened the series at one game apiece, and today, the next Minnesota Lynx beat writer Terry Horstman is here to chat all about Game 2, the second game between the Minnesota Lynx and the Connecticut Sun, what changed from Game 1, talk about what adjustments need to be made in Game 3, his predictions for Game 3, and more. Lockdown Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Friday. You are Locked On to Women's Basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Thanks for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. If this is your first time listening to Locked On Women's Basketball, we at The Next have over 100 reported pieces every single month. We have a beat reporter on every single WNBA team, one on more than 15 different NCAA beats, so get that YouTube subscription up. And you can also support us by subscribing to The Next, $9 a month, $72 a year at thenexthoops.com. Today, we'll talk all about Tuesday's Game 2 and what the differences were between Game 1, what to expect in Game 3, our predictions for Game 3 and beyond, and more. Joining me today is Terry Horstman, the Next Minnesota Lynx beat writer. Well, getting a little bit of deja vu, Terry, but thanks for coming back on.
Exactly.
For our listeners that may have missed the game on Tuesday, what happened in Game 2 and how did the Lynx even the series?
Well, it was pretty close to what we were talking about on Monday, Natalie. And thank you again for having me on. Love being on Locked On whenever I get the chance to. So this is so fun. It was another knockdown, drag-out game between the Sun and the Lynx, as they're wont to do. So I think our prediction, or mine, was just the inverse of the score in Game 1, 73-70, and the Sun scored 70, the Lynx scored 77. So it was a very similar game. I think from a Lynx perspective, what was encouraging about it is the Sun were able to accomplish what they were very clearly trying to do, was just take Napheesa Collier out of the game offensively and say, literally anyone else beat us. Alyssa Thomas was her usual phenomenal self, especially on the defensive end. Fee shot, 3 of 14 from the field. Everything was contested. But the rest of the Lynx started hitting shots. And Courtney Williams had a big second half. Alanna Smith had her best shooting night in a while. And all of them played great defense, as the Sun did as well. So it was kind of the round 2 that we're expecting. And I'm expecting another chippy, physical affair in round 3 of this series tonight.
And we talked about the crowd maybe taking it up a notch, even if it was a Tuesday night. Did the crowd take the atmosphere up a notch?
I think they did too, and the players also gave them reason to. Like Courtney Williams after the game said in Game 1 that the Sun were talking a lot, and there was a lot of chatter going on the court that it was noticeable. But I'm like, it's a playoff game; they're gonna talk a little smack. Game 2 felt even chippier than Game 1. There are a couple different, Kayla McBride got a technical foul. Kayla McBride never gets technical fouls. There is, moments between Marina Mabry being her normal antagonistic self, which is just great TV, very compelling theater. But yeah, there is just a few more standoffs, a few more dust ups. Myisha Hines-Allen showing in many ways in that game why she was such a valuable acquisition for the Lynx, being just solid bench minutes, one, but also just like being kind of an enforcer. There was this kind of a weird little jump ball where both Fee and Mabry went to the ground. Nothing really dirty there too, but Myisha ran in right away to defend her superstar captain, and it felt like a playoff game. It was great atmosphere. The fans reacted. Let the refs know how they felt about it, letting a few things go. And I've heard nothing but great things about Sun fans. So I'm really excited to see how the Connecticut crowd creates an advantage for their son tonight in Connecticut. But yeah, definitely felt like a playoff game, and that's what we want. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been counting down the days this week for Friday, which is now today. And now I'm counting down the hours until I head down and fans start coming in. But going back to game 2, who shined for each team or who impressed you the most?
Well, for the Lynx, I'll talk about Smith again. I think the Lynx are just a different team when Smith is out there hitting shots and being a threat offensively. Every player is going to have their ups and downs when shots are falling and when they're not. But I think when you have to guard Smith, no matter where she is on the floor, because she's a threat to hit from anywhere, it really unlocks a different level of the Lynx offense. And so when she and Williams were sort of finding their groove and shots were going down, and it really helped the Lynx out a lot. And the score was 12-10 after the first quarter, and both teams were just having a really hard time finding the bottom of the net. And both coaches kind of mentioned, like, yeah, let's not give our defenses too much credit. We just need to hit shots. So Williams and Smith just finding the necessary shot making that you need to win playoff games, I think was big. And the defense on Mabry was huge too, because Mabry killed them in game 1 and was off to another hot start in the first half. But they held her to just one basket from the field and 4 total points in the second half, I believe. So if you're able to do that and get some of your players who aren't fee to start getting buckets, then that's going to be a good recipe for the Lynx. And then on the Connecticut side, you can't shine enough light on Alyssa Thomas. She's incredible at every single level of the game, and she was marvelous on defense. He clearly showed that she's the toughest matchup for Collier in this league. So I think we're going to get 3 more games of of this, and 120 more minutes of just the 2 best defensive teams in the league throwing haymakers at each other. And it's great playoff basketball. So I'm really happy to be in Connecticut for it.
Yeah, and excited to get to talk about all of that with you in person tonight. I have to say, like, I covered the Sun in 2019 and 2020, and even 5 years ago, watching Alyssa Thomas has been incredible over the last 5 years, and I can't believe it's been 5 years of covering the WNBA in some capacity or another. But just I cannot say enough good words about how incredible it is to see Alyssa Thomas live. In game 2, there was what you felt was like a pivotal moment or turning point in the game. Was there one of those in game 2?
Yeah, the Lynx went on a run in the third quarter. They've kind of just been the team of the third quarter in the W this season. I think Reeve has more than earned the Coach of the Year award honors she received by just her third quarter or halftime adjustments alone. And I think the biggest lead for the Lynx was about 15 that they got at one point in the third quarter, and may have been the fourth. But in this matchup with these 2 defenses, them being up by 15, I kind of looked up at the scoreboard and I was like, that essentially translates to like a 35-point lead in any other game. Connecticut, of course, came back and, made it. I think they got the lead back down to 6 after that, but it just showed how hard it is to claw back against either of these defenses. And I don't think we're going to see, I would be surprised if like we saw any kind of, tilted final score lines in this series. But when the Lynx got it up to 15 in that second half, it really felt like they were flexing their muscles a little bit and had iced the game in a way. They obviously had it, and there was a lot of work to do, but they took care of business. So I think when you do get up against the best defensive team in the W like that, it does show like, okay, that's the mark of a team that can win the title. And when they were able to do that, especially after overcoming just insane shooting woes in the first quarter, I think they found that like extra little bit of belief and that extra little bit of juice that you need to close out a playoff game. So when they were kind of running with it a little bit in the third quarter, I think that really put the stamp on it. And the bench minutes they got too were huge. Having Chechi Zandalicini back, I think, was pivotal. She hit 1 3, another one, but just, in that, I think it was a pretty timely 3 when the other Lynx weren't hitting that many shots. And between herself, Myisha, who I mentioned, and former Sun, Natisha Heidemann, they outscored the Sun bench 16-4 in that game, but we're also doing everything else, moving the ball well, timely rebounds, helped them out rebound the Sun, which I predicted wouldn't happen in any game in this series. So I just think that third quarter run in general was kind of the pivotal moment if you're sort of searching for a stretch of time where you could really find the difference in who won and who lost in that game.
Awesome. Well, put your crystal ball away. We'll talk more about the bench for both teams in the next segment. But coming up next, we'll also talk about what adjustments need to be made or maybe don't in Game 3 as the series moves to Uncasville. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to events with my husband, and I'm so excited that Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It was so easy to find the best deals for this week's Kings of Leon concert. I just went to Game Time Picks and could see super deals, the top 1% in value for the event, including tickets under $60, and amazing deals which are in the top 5% in value, and great deals in the top 10% of value for the event. I love that you can see the view from the seat before you buy the ticket, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So, I guess we'll start off with the bench. The Sun only got 6, if I counted correctly, of their 70 points from not only their bench and Veronica Burton, Olivia Nelson-Ododa, and Ty Harris, but also Brianna Jones. So they got the other 64 points from 4 starters. Do you think the Sun need to get their bench and Jones more involved in Game 3?
Yeah, I think that's something they're probably talking about. And Ty Harris was the player who missed Game 1 for the Sun, which does put Mabry in the starting lineup. I can't believe that Marina Mabry, has come off the bench this year at times. But so Ty only played 7 minutes on Tuesday night, and Reeve has been very complimentary about what she brings to the table, sort of all just ever when I've heard Cheryl talk about the Sun. So if Harris is healthier tonight than she was on Tuesday night, that could play a role too. But I mean, yeah, I think getting production out of the bench is huge, because you just have everyone on these teams can play defense, and there's every matchup is a pretty like just a basketball lover's dream of really good offensive player going up against a really good defensive player. Look on like the perimeter, you have McBride guarding Mabry, or Bridget Carlton guarding Dejanay Carrington, and sometimes like they'll switch, and there's this any matchup is someone who's been tremendous defensively this year. So in those minutes where you have more of a bench presence out there, I think whoever wins those minutes, that's a really great recipe to win the game. So I do think they need more out of Ty Harris. Nelson-Ododa has also been really good on the defensive side this whole season. I've been really impressed with her. She only played 5 minutes in Game 1, I think, and Veronica Burton played 27 off the bench, had a little bit better game in Game 1. So I do think that is one of the keys that needs to be highlighted here, is sort of who gets the best basketball out of their like non-stars. Not to say these players can't be stars, but it's just sort of out of your top 3, top 4, what's the next level? And I think the Sun were probably a little bit better in that area in game 1, and the Lynx were a little bit better in game 2. There's obviously a lot of other factors at play here, but I don't think it's a mistake that that's what was consistent with whoever won each of the first 2 games of the series.
And then on the other hand, back in August on Locked On Women's Basketball, we talked about Myisha Hines-Allen being traded from the Mystics to the Lynx. How has she made an impact in her short time in Minnesota? And you can even brag a little bit about how right you were about, her physicality off the bench and what she brings, especially now in the playoffs.
Well, shout out to our Mystics beat writer and managing editor, Jen Hatfield, who basically took me to grad school on Myisha Hines-Allen, just in our Slack chats. But yeah, it's what's cool about this series is you're kind of seeing the 2 biggest trade deadline acquisitions against each other. Where I don't think it's a question at all that the Sun kind of won the trade deadline with the acquisition of Mabry. That was the unquestioned sort of biggest name that moved during the trade deadline. And I think maybe the only other trade that happened that same day with like a meaningful player was the Myisha Hines-Allen trade. And those 2 were chirping back and forth all night in game 2. I loved it. It was such a fun basketball game, Natalie. And yeah, this series is just so great. But so Hines-Allen, she's a pretty unflappable player mentally, clearly, and that fits in with the rest of this team. They just don't panic. And while she wasn't someone who got a ton of minutes on that Mystics team in 2019, she has a championship ring. And I don't think that sealed the deal on whether the Lynx wanted to trade for her or not, but it certainly helps. And when things were getting just like a little hairy or maybe a little too chippy, she obviously will not back down from any of that. But it was like, we need someone to get a bucket here. You could tell from the Lynx, and she drove to a layup or drove down the lane in a real physical manner and bodied her way into getting an open layup. She had that just amazing mid-range shot off the glass. I don't know if she called bank or not, but it doesn't matter. It counts the same to beat the buzzer going into the half. And that's the type of player who instantly becomes a fan favorite. And those types of players are important when you're trying to make a run for a title. The physicality she brings was obviously a need this team had going into the deadline. Not that I think saying Fee can protect herself for sure, but you still need those players around to make sure hey, no one's gonna take a cheap shot here. no one's gonna dive on my superstar player on the ground for a jump ball and not feel me come up right behind you and tell you what I feel about it. The fans fed off that energy too. I don't think there was much of a game 1 was still a great atmosphere, but everything she brings to the table just manifests itself in a positive way. And she was just enormous off the bench in game 2. It was really fun to watch.
Yeah. And the Mabry trade and the Myisha Hines-Allen trade happened a month apart, with Marina coming to the Sun before the Olympic break and the Myisha right after. But in my brain, they happened at the same time because there weren't that many games in between.
No, there's 2 over a month. Yeah.
So definitely agree with you there about how cool it is to see 2 really impactful trades and see them both working out for both players. You always love to see that. On Monday we discussed the Lynx 3-point shooting and rebounding. They had more 3-pointers and out-rebounded the Sun on Tuesday night. How much did those 2 things impact the team's performance?
Yeah, I think for the Lynx, they kind of need to be the better team from the 3-point line in this series if they want to win. And they did a good job defending Bonner as well. I kept the energy in the game, it kind of felt like they were getting drug up and down the court a little bit on the glass again, but the box score never reflected that. So I think that's just me. Or I'm used to seeing this team give up more offensive rebounds that I know they want to get up. So it just felt like they were giving up too many, but they kept it, it was close in second chance points. And Smith had a tough game one on the offensive side, but was very good defensively and kind of showed like, okay, we need her to hit shots because you can't take her off the court for her defense. So I do, again, just not to belabor that point, but I think Smith having an elite night offensively again, too, makes it really helpful for the Lynx. But I didn't have that on my, prediction sheet that they would out rebound the Sun. So if they do that, I mean, you've got to feel great about it, unless it's like there's no chances for rebounds because the Sun are shooting 100% from the field, which I think is somewhat unlikely. I never second guess the Connecticut Sun or Stephanie White, but if they, I think that is just a major thing. If that's one of the things the Lynx can clean up and get better at, which just wasn't one of their main strengths. Like they didn't out rebound a ton of teams this season, and they didn't necessarily need to. That's not to Coach Reeve, if you're listening, that's not to diminish the importance of rebounding and effort in that area. But I think, they really played a good game on the glass on both ends of the floor. And just by playing a little bit better defense to, limit Connecticut's makes and make sure that they weren't taking the ball out of the net and being able to play in a little more transition. That was enormous for them. So if we see a similar rebounding performance, it's going to bode well for Minnesota.
Awesome. Well, coming up next, we'll talk about our Game 3 predictions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. 2 games of the WNBA semifinals are in the books, and with Game 3s coming up tonight, you can also bet at FanDuel.com on the matchups between the Las Vegas Aces and the New York Liberty, as well as the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx. You can also bet on the top point scorer, rebounds leader, and made threes leader for both series. Make sure to check out the series specials as well. And you can even build your own parlay as well as bet on who will win the WNBA championship, the finals MVP, and even looking ahead, you can place a futures bet on who will win the regular season MVP for the 2025 regular season. So you were right about Game 2, so I have to ask you again, who do you think needs to step up or continue to shine for either team in Game 3?
I mean, I think we're due for a pretty big DeWanna Bonner offensive explosion, and it would make a lot of sense and hit a lot of storylines for that game to happen tonight. So that's, it seemed like she was just like about to go off in both of those games, and she still played well. I'm not trying to say she didn't, but yeah, I think playing at home, I wouldn't consider this, a must-win for Atwell because it's not a closeout game. So I hate it when people say it's a must-win when it's not going to be an end of series thing. So I'm guilty of my own preferences there. But yeah, I think we'll see Bonner go off, and I do want to see how Fee responds to a game where I wouldn't say she wasn't herself offensively. I mean, like if you want to ask her like what 3 for 14, I want to see you do that a lot. Well, like most games she's not playing Alyssa Thomas, so but I do think it's hard to keep Fee on the mat for that long too. So I think on the offensive side of the floor, I'm looking at Collier and Bonner tonight just to see which star player can find their offensive flow. And I think whoever does likely wins game 3.
Yeah, and as maybe you'll soon find out, there are a few things that the Connecticut crowd loves more than a DeWanna Bonner 3. They go absolutely wild. And there was one game where she had a career high at, I think it was 6 or 7 threes in a game. They went absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
Loved every second of it. So
If Bonner
definitely,
hits 7 threes tonight, Connecticut's winning.
I do believe they won that game.
Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it would make sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, you might soon find that out. Do you have any other game 3 predictions?
No. It's just, I think it's gonna be the same. Like I'll buy coffee to whatever Locked On listener if there's a single true blowout in this series. I'll say Connecticut gets this one 75-74.
Ooh.
That's just what's calling to me right now. So and also to be, partially because I think this will be a tough one to win. I think them having these two teams meeting so late in the season in Connecticut, and the Lynx stealing one, if you want to use that terminology. But I think like that just kind of felt like that was like maybe almost even like the curtain raiser to the playoffs. And I don't think Connecticut wants to let Minnesota come in and get a second straight win on its home floor. And also just also show that I'm not partial just to Lynx basketball. So Connecticut, here's your predicted win from me here on the Locked On Women's Basketball podcast. You're welcome.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see another close game, see if Alyssa Thomas gets a triple-double. I could probably say that about every Sun game because she's come so close every time. And then, excited to see more Myisha Hines-Allen and see how the rest of the Lynx bench do, especially after game 2. Terry, your first time in Connecticut, what are you expecting from the atmosphere this weekend at Mohegan Sun?
I'm expecting a great, rambunctious crowd. The atmosphere in Sun games I've watched on TV has, permeates through the screen. So I'm excited for that. Got to walk around Mohegan Sun a bit last night after getting in town. It is quite the facility. I'm surprised. I swung by the sports book and there's playoff baseball and Thursday night football. I'm like, I was just looking at some of the lines. I'm surprised there's not just like a standing Alyssa Thomas triple double line that it's like, will she get the triple double? Will she not? Like, but I think that'd be too much easy money.
I don't think that because the Mohegan tribe owns the Connecticut Sun. I don't think there can be betting on the Connecticut Sun.
That makes a lot of sense.
Casino.
I didn't think that one through, but yeah, but just being able to like go through there and just like, oh, like this is where you go into the arena, like this is cool. And yeah, there's a lot of people around. I got to see some Lynx employees who traveled last night, and yeah, you can feel the excitement around and the energy around town. So. I'm expecting a great game, and I think we'll get one. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, excited to see you in just a couple of hours. Thank you, Terry, for joining me. Where can the people find you and your work?
On Twitter at Terry Horstman. That's just as my name spelled. Instagram's at Terrence Horstman, and thenexthoops.com. You click on Minnesota Lynx and you'll find me and all my work there. We've got some fun pieces of content coming up through the rest of the series, regardless of who wins. So there'll be some great stuff for people to enjoy. And yeah, it's been such a fun playoff. So just read everything that goes up on the Next too, especially all the work you guys are doing on the college basketball side. I can't believe it's October 4th and we have conference media days happening. So like basketball truly never stops.
Yeah. And Locked On listeners, little plug, sometime later this month. Haven't figured out the exact dates. You'll be getting a lot of Atlantic 10 Media Day content coming out from me. So just a little plug. That's something on your radar. But make sure you're also paying attention to all of our wonderful playoffs coverage as well. And thanks to our listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Now go check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to tune in tomorrow to hear from our WNBA draft crew, and come back next week for more WNBA playoffs coverage.